Hello, this is Dr. Laura Markham of AhaParenting.com, and you are in for such a treat today because I have with me L.R.Knost of Little Heart Books, who's the author of 2,000 Kisses a Day, Gentle Parenting Through the Ages and Stages, and she has a new book out, Whispers Through Time, Communication Through the Ages and Stages of Childhood. I'm so excited about her new book, and you will be too when you hear about it. And I need to add that this is not just a parenting author who talks about theory. She has 6 children. They range in age from toddlers to young adults. So she's in the trenches every day with being a mom. She sees how her ideas work out as kids grow through the middle childhood years into the preteen years, into teenagers, and even into young adults. And so she knows that her ideas work. And I am a longtime fan of Linda's, and I'm so excited that you get to meet her today. So, Linda, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, in your newest book, Whispers Through Time, you focus on helping parents communicate with their children. And most people think of parenting as being, honestly, as being discipline, as being how do we get our kids to act right. And your focus in this book is really about communication. And why would you choose that to focus on?
Well, discipline is guiding, it's teaching, it's modeling. All of those things are things that we do through relationships. And communication is the basis of all human relationships. It's how we connect, it's how we learn. It is when we discover how our children's development affects their behavior and affects their ability to communicate. That kind of gives us the tools that we need to then guide them gently and successfully through what are really just normal stages of childhood. So that when we look at them as abnormal, then we may respond to them either punitively or just from our own childhood angst. So just kind of ahead of time knowing that things are normal is helpful in and of itself, and that is really what the first of the book is, just kind of discovering what's normal and how do I respond to it.
So you take us through the ages and stages from babies right through into the teen years, and you help us understand this is a normal thing for a child this age to be doing, and here's how best to handle that as a parent?
Well, I don't know if it's best as opposed to here's just some suggestions, some ideas. I wouldn't want to tell someone this is the best way because one of the things that I always encourage my readers to do is to know their own child and to know themselves and their own family dynamics.
Right. And every child is different. And what will work in different families is obviously going to be different.
Right.
But you do have a point of view. Your point of view, how would you describe your point of view or what's different about your approach than, mainstream parenting the conventional parenting that most of us have grown up with?
Well, I think really if I had to sum up my approach, it's just golden rule parenting. It's treating children the way that we want to be treated. None of us enjoy being yelled at, and so yelling at a child is treating them in a way that we don't want to be treated. When we have a bad day, we really would like people to give us, some grace and to kind of, give us the benefit of the doubt when we make mistakes. And treating our children the same way that we want to be treated is really the heart, I think, of gentle parenting. And so that really is the foundation of my entire approach.
I love that, golden rule parenting. What a wonderful, it just says it in such a succinct way that everybody understands what you mean. And you also referred to it as gentle parenting.
Yeah.
Do you think gentle parenting works for all children? Because I've met parents, of course, who say that it doesn't work for their kids. What would you say to that?
Well, I get that question a lot, and my response is pretty much always I ask them what they mean by to work, because gentle parenting won't cure childhood. It's not going to force children it's not going to force children to skip normal stages of development. What it does is it helps parents to understand their children so that they can communicate with them effectively and empathetically. And it provides parents really with the opportunity to take a breath, to slow down, to think before they respond, so that they can actually model the self-control and the self-regulation that they're wanting from their children. And then it goes on and it builds that secure foundation of trust-based mutual respect that invites cooperation and team spirit.
Wonderful. So beautifully said. It helps parents understand their child and model the self-regulation that they're hoping their child will learn. And of course, that is how children learn. They won't always say we do what we say, but they will always do what we do, right? So that's great.
So true. Yes.
So I have so many questions for you, and I know we have limited time today, but let me ask you about your dreary, weary mama blues tips. Because parenting is so hard, and we've all been in that place where we just can't summon up an ounce of feeling good enough inside to be generous of spirit with our children. So you actually give a lot of specific tips in your book to beat the dreary, weary mama blues. Well, can you share a few of those with us?
Absolutely. Sure. There's a joke in my family that I'm always telling people to look at trees. And it's true. I have a son who is in pre-med right now, and he's stressed with finals and things like that. I tell him, get up, walk out of the library at school, and go stand next to a tree, look straight up, and it's amazing how small everything looks by comparison. So my first suggestion is go outside. Take the problems, take the frustrations, take them outside. And when you've got the warm sun on your face and you're watching your little ones giggling and running around, and it really just gives you a better perspective immediately. It's just like an immediate dose of sunshine, which is really helpful. And another thing, and I'm a writer, so this one is particularly good for me, is writing down a list of all the good things in one column and the bad things in another. And it just really helps you to begin to again, just to kind of get things into perspective, and having a list of those bad things also, you can look at them and say, hey, maybe I could actually address a few of those things. Writing the good things down is sort of like, counting your blessings. And then, some of the other things are to break your life down into bite-sized chunks instead of trying to have a huge chore day. Break things down and do one load a day, and they don't necessarily have to be folded, put them in a basket and put them in the closet. That's fine. Just things like that, just kind of breaking things down. And then also just don't forget that you have dreams, and it's okay to keep dreaming those dreams. And the season of life may not be right now for you to follow through on them. It doesn't mean you have to feel like you're letting them go. Life is a lot longer than we give it credit for usually. And we can just continue to think and ponder and daydream and just get ready for the time that does come that we can fulfill those dreams.
Yes. Beautiful. I know there's a question that many people listening to you right now are thinking. I love reading your work. I love your ideas, but I have more than one child. How can I possibly put these ideas into practice when I have multiple small children? Whose needs come first?
Yes, a lot of people ask that, and of course I've been there with 6 children. Am there. I have little ones right now. And for me, it's a combination of just having those tools at hand. I wear my baby. I love my slings and other baby carriers and things like that, and it keeps them right there up at heart level and within kissing distance, and they're then actively involved in whatever I'm doing, and we're communicating and building our relationship. And while I'm doing that, my hands are free to be working on other things and doing other things. And, there's always those moments. And I think this is probably one of the biggest things. There are always going to be those moments when everybody needs you at once. And you feel torn, and you feel overwhelmed, and you feel like you don't know what you're doing. And what I want most for moms and dads and people, in that situation to understand is that's okay. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to feel weary. It's okay to feel like you don't have all the answers. That's all right. Because if you're not feeling that way, you're probably not really doing a lot with your life and growing as a person. So those feelings of being overwhelmed and things like that, that's okay. Understanding that it's all right and that it will pass, and that you'll all get through it together and that you'll be okay on the other side, it's probably more important than any specific suggestions that I can give anyone.
Just knowing it's going to be fine.
Knowing it's going to be
so
fine.
What about those hair-raising moments when you've got a baby, even you're wearing a baby, and the toddler is crying for attention and the preschooler is whining, and meanwhile, you've got to, now I'm going to add the thing that everybody is really doesn't happen that often, but people feel like it happens constantly, which is you have to get everybody out of the house for something. What do you do in that moment?
Well, that's when I pull out the sillies. I mean, our floor turns into lava, or we need to go rescue our shoes from the closet monsters, and we have bubble racers where we blow bubbles and race them to the car, and we have tickle fests getting into car seats, and I tell parents, just don't leave your funny bone at home. The funny bone is the one thing that's going to get you through a lot of those trying times. We sing silly songs, we make faces, all of those different sorts of things that you can pull out in the moment. Sometimes all of a sudden my foot will suddenly decide not to work, and I'm dragging the foot behind me, and it's amazing how much small children love that stuff.
Yes, I love it. Slapstick. It really works with the younger set. It's true.
It does, yeah.
So this idea of wanting to love each of your children best and to have each of them thrive when you have more kids than you can be holding at any given moment. How do you prevent sibling rivalry? Or how do you, not prevent it, but how do you, when sibling rivalry comes up, how do you recognize it? How do you respond to it?
Well, again, when I get that question, a lot of times I try to ask the parent questions, because a lot of times what they're terming sibling rivalry is actually just normal childhood behavior that you would find in a daycare or at the park or play groups and things like that. It's just, not wanting to share toys and things like that. That's not really sibling rivalry. That's just normal childhood behavior. Sibling rivalry actually is, to me, it's just one of those red flags that people need some connection. And we need to reconnect as parents with them. We need to reconnect them to each other. And so I don't leave children to deal with that alone, because that is literally the opposite of what needs to happen at that point. At that point, it's time for us to get together, to play a board game if it's older children. It's to get outside and roll around the grass and look at the clouds and spots and shapes together. Those to me are just signals. Children's behavior, they're communicating something to us. And sibling rivalry is a signal that I'm feeling disconnected and I'm going to start competing. So anytime there's that kind of negative competition, that needs to be addressed by a parent, with connection.
Yes, I love that idea. That in fact, sibling rivalry is a cry for the parent to connect. And when you say not wanting to share toys, that's not sibling rivalry. That's normal childhood behavior. But and there's a whole continuum between that and fierce competition where kids are fighting physically with each other on a regular basis. What would you say symptoms of sibling rivalry are versus normal childhood behavior?
When children are I want that toy, took my toy, I want that piece of toast and not this piece of toast and things like that. Those you just respond to sort of in the moment and you deal with that. But when children are actively negatively competing for attention, when they are acting jealous of the time you're spending with one, or you begin to see some real negative behaviors and sometimes even bullying of each other and using each other's weaknesses against them and things like that. When it begins to turn towards this sort of negative behaviors, that is the key there to really sitting up, paying attention, and beginning to really work on some reconnection.
Now, I'll tell you the question that always comes up at this point in discussions with parents for me, and that is my 2-year-old or my 3-year-old or my 4-year-old hits the little one. And you advocate gentle parenting, but I can't just sit by gently if my child is hitting the little one. What do I do then? What would you recommend to those parents?
Yeah, absolutely. hitting is a big thing. It's normal childhood behavior, but it's not something that you can just sit back and allow to happen, obviously. First of all, proactive parenting. If you've got a child that's in that stage and you have a younger child or even an older child that's being attacked, then one of the things is just make sure you're supervising, make sure that you are nearby, and if you have to leave the room, that you either take the one that's having trouble controlling their hand, or even biting or kicking or scratching or any of those things. You make sure that if you have to leave the room and you can't be supervising at that moment, that you take that particular child with you, or the other one that is the quote unquote victim of it. So just being proactive that way, watching for triggers, demonstrating gentle hands when an incident does occur, whether it's biting or hitting or something like that. Stepping into the situation and offering comfort to the one that's injured, and inviting the one that's done the lashing out to join you in that. Oh my goodness, you hurt Sissy. Let's go get a Band-Aid. Let's fix this. Things like that. It invites them to help fix the problem they've created, which is very powerful for a child. And
yes.
It's also powerful for the one that has been injured to begin to step out of that victim role, because as you're verbalizing everything, you're actually teaching both sides how to verbalize things, which is providing them and equipping them with the tools that they're going to need as they mature and become capable of using them to not use their hands or their teeth or their feet.
Yes. I love the idea that we're inviting the child who's done the hurting to help fix the problem they've created, because every one of us at some point in our lives has hurt someone else in some way. And we need to start learning early that, in fact, we can make a repair. And, in fact, it's not something we want to do to hurt people if we can help it. And I think if we can teach this lesson in a non-punitive way to a 3-year-old, it changes their entire life.
It does. It really does. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So I have to ask you to talk about whining, because I hear so often from parents, I just can't stand the whining. How can I get him to stop whining? But you say whining is a win. Tell us why.
Well, crying for newborns and infants is biologically designed to grate on our nerves so that we will respond to it. It's survival. Whining is basically the same thing. Whining is a win because it is actually a sign of maturity that your child is beginning to grow out of the crying as communication stage, or as the only really communication stage. And so it's a signal, again, it's a behavioral signal to a parent that your child is heading down the path towards an all-out meltdown or tantrum even, but is actually exercising some self-regulation. And so while they're not capable of using their normal voice at that moment and being in full control of themselves, they're not totally losing it and all the way laying on the floor, kicking their feet, having a tantrum. They're actually in the middle ground there. They're actually trying. It's kind of like us when we say we're on our last nerve. That's what they are at that moment. They're on their last nerve, but they're holding on to it. And so whining, if you can change your perspective as a parent and see it for what it is, then you can respond much more empathetically. I tell parents, when your child whines, recognize that as them being on their last nerve. Recognize that as them trying to exercise that self-control and self-regulation. Stop what you're doing. Get down on their level. Look at them. Say, I see that you're having a hard time. Let's breathe together for a second. Take a minute. I'm right here for you, and I'm going to help you. And just give them a minute and help them, because once you've done that, they're going to stop whining because they know they have your attention. They know you're there for them. They know you're going to help them. And so the impetus behind the meltdown that's impending, you're backing it up, and you're kind of offering your own emotional support and maturity to aid them in getting back to the point of self-regulation.
Yes. Wonderful. Connection. It's always about connection in the end, right?
It always is, yes.
So not everybody understands this kind of parenting or agrees with it, and parents get so much feedback from other people. So there will be any parent listening to this who tries to use these practices in life with their child will get feedback from around them, from their mother or their mother-in-law or their sister or their friends. Somebody will disagree. It just might even be a clerk in the supermarket or somebody in a restaurant. And I guess the question I would ask you is, what do you say to people who have a very different point of view and think you're doing it wrong?
Well, it really depends on the person. I mean, if it's in the supermarket or things like that, I focus on my child. If my child is having a tantrum or is heading towards a tantrum or I have some other issue going on and someone wants to make a negative comment or you just have those eyes boring into you, my focus is on my child and not on that person. And mentally I tell myself I am actually modeling for that person gentleness and kindness to my child. And that is going to be far more powerful for that person to see, and actually to see the tantrum stopping or see the child, getting themselves together, as opposed to me turning around and lashing out at that person, which is not gentle. Again, it's all about communication. It's all about connection, even with other people. If it's a family member, let's just say, one big issue that I'm always getting is people saying, my spouse does not support gentle parenting. What do I do? And again,
yes.
I tell them, take the same approach that you're taking with your child. Model that for your spouse. Take some quiet time. Acknowledge their frustrations. Listen to their point of view. Share your own struggles, your own frustrations, and things like that. And then work together, brainstorm. Come to your consensus that meets their needs and your children's needs. Open that discussion. And invite them to cooperate with you, and also compromises. Because, again, modeling is so much more powerful, and kindness, just flat-out kindness, is so much more powerful than fighting and trying to argue your point. Because when you argue, it just brings up defenses, and by arguing, you've lost the argument.
Yes, even by engaging in the argument, you've lost it.
Exactly.
And when you're coming from a place of fear with your spouse, you're invariably coming up with solutions that are not going to be solutions of love, right? Whereas if you're coming from a place of love with your spouse, you can move towards solutions that will be more loving. So when you talk to moms who say, my husband just doesn't go for this, he really thinks the kids need a more strict response. You can't let kids just get away with things. What would you say to that husband?
Well, when I have done, direct-to-parent counseling and things like that, I talk to them. Again, it goes back to the golden rule. What's more powerful for you? Let's just say in a situation with your boss. If your boss just doesn't like what you're doing and docks your pay, what feeling does that inspire? Even me saying those words, what feeling does that inspire in you? If instead your boss comes to you and says, I see that you're struggling with this. How can I help you? What feeling does that look like? And just kind of appealing to, again, their own feelings and how they want to be treated is very powerful. And also just kind of making the illustration of you are using your own frustrations as an excuse or an explanation, let's say, for why you are lashing out at your child, either verbally or even physically, why you're lashing out. You're saying, they just make me so frustrated. So what you're using as an explanation is you are getting frustrated and you're losing your self-control. When a child gets frustrated and loses self-control and either tantrums or lashes out or screams or yells or whines or whatever, they are reacting from their own frustrations and losing self-control. And so what you're saying to me is that you should be able to use that as an excuse for your behavior and not give the same grace to a child. And let's just think about that logically. That does not make sense.
It certainly doesn't. It's such a beautiful way of putting it. It certainly doesn't. Actually, it's our job to be the grown-ups no matter what, right? That's what we signed on for when we had children.
Absolutely. We are the only adults in the relationship.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Somebody has to be the adult. Yeah. I love it. Now, one of your chapters is called Love Means Sometimes Having to Say You're Sorry. Tell us more about that.
Well, the title itself is kind of a throwback to the love story with Oliver, and there they said love means never having to say you're sorry. And while I really, really enjoy that movie, I always thought, no, that's not true. That's even as a child when watching that movie, I always thought that's not true. Love means being able to say you're sorry. And again, going back to the golden rule, I want someone to apologize to me if I have hurt their feelings, if I have overreacted, if someone has hurt my feelings, if someone has overreacted to me, if someone has heard me wrong, or any number of things, them coming to me and apologizing to me, it opens the door to restore our relationship and our trust and our comfort level with each other. With children, we as parents, we are going to make mistakes, flat out. I always tell parents we are imperfect people raising imperfect people in an imperfect world. And so we're going to make mistakes. We're going to fly off the handle sometimes. We're going to say the wrong thing sometimes. We're going to respond negatively sometimes. It's going to happen. Being willing and able and following through on apologizing to a child, you're acknowledging that they're human. You're acknowledging that you've hurt them. You're opening the door to healing. It's the unhealed hurt. It's the unsaid apologies that kind of let those words and those hurts fester inside of a child or even inside of us as adults. It really creates blocks in our hearts for our relationships with the person that's hurt us, but also for our future relationships. It really is vital to be willing to go in and make things right with our children when we make mistakes.
Wonderful. Now, this is where parents will sometimes say to me, but I feel like I have to apologize over and over.
Well, and sometimes we do. And if we do, and move on. And what that teaches our children is when they make mistakes over and over, they also can, again, it's just modeling what we want them to do.
And so do you, in our society, it's taught that we make children say they're sorry. So if you're at the playground and your child inadvertently or intentionally hit somebody else, bump someone else, they need to say they're sorry to the other child before the transaction is finished and people can move on. And that's the expectation in our culture. What's your feeling about children's transgressions and apologies and saying they're sorry? I hear you say we should model that, but what are we asking of our child at that moment?
Well, whether it's I'm sorry or a thank you or any number of those sort of social mores, I invite the child, do you think that this would be a good time to say you're sorry? Do you think that maybe you owe that person an apology, depending on the age level that you're talking to? Would you like to say thank you? Things like that. I invite the child. If the child says no, they don't want to do it, which sometimes they do, I say, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll do it for you this time. And then I turn around and I do it for them. And I will
Wonderful.
say, I'm very sorry that happened. I'm very sorry that, or thank you very much for this. And I just model it, and then we just move on. And so it takes it out of being a point of contention, but again, it follows through on modeling behavior.
Yes. And tell us how that works with your own children. What have you seen when you have done that?
It works absolutely beautifully. It really does. And like when my toddler, when she takes something or has something, that I really don't want her to have, something dangerous or whatever, I put out my hand and it says, hey, give that to me. I put my hand and I say, thank you, please, and she will hand it to me. It's just an invitation to cooperate. And in our household, one of the remarks through many, many years of parenting now that I have is, your children are so polite even with each other. How in the world do you do it? I'm like, I don't do it, I model it. I say please and thank you to my children. And you know what? I say please and thank you about just normal everyday things. Thank you for closing the door. Thank you for putting your shoes away. It's just a daily life. It's a daily conversation, and it doesn't even occur to my children that they're doing it just because it's so normal for them.
Wonderful. And when you do the apology, so I know parents are thinking, okay, when I say, okay, I'll apologize for you this time, and they turn to the other child who got bumped at the slide, and they say, I'm so sorry this happened. Do they say, I'm so sorry Johnny bumped you, he forgot to use his words, or do you just, which is we could imagine Johnny might have some reaction to that, our son Johnny, in this instance, or do you simply say, I'm so sorry that happened and you got bumped. I hope you're feeling better. How do you handle that the actual wording?
It really is going to depend on the situation. It's going to depend on the age of the child. If we're talking about toddlers, I might say, oh, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Do you need some help? I offer help, anything that I'm going to want my child to do in the future. So offering help, offering to fix something, those are the types of things that I would do. And again, it's going to be, situational at any point. And if it's an older child that for some reason, if it's an older child that does not want to apologize for some reason, that kind of raises a red flag to me that the child was responding to something. And so I'll follow up later with my own child and I'll say, I could see that you were upset and not able to talk about it at that point or in front of that person. But let's go ahead and talk about that right now because I want to know what's going on in your heart right now so that we can kind of share because, once they pass about 3 or 4 years old, when they're hitting about 5 or 6, if they're not wanting to apologize, they generally have a reason for that. It may not be what we would consider as adults to be a valid reason, but it's valid to them. And I want to know that so we can kind of talk through it and get the thought processes going.
Yes, wonderful. I think parents who have parented in a different way will often see children resist apologizing because they're on the defensive. But if you've parented this way from the time your child was small, then they know it isn't a matter of getting in trouble if they admit something or if they apologize. It doesn't mean they're wrong or bad. It's a way of reconnecting and making things right in their own heart as well as with the other person.
Absolutely.
So I guess that leads to another question, which is, I think has to be our final question, but I think is a really important one to parents. If you've been parenting in a different way, if you've been punishing because you thought that's what you needed to do to raise a good child, if you've been yelling, screaming, because that's what often parents are driven to or feel driven to, how do you heal from that and change things with your children? Because often it's not only the parent who's developed bad habits, it's the child.
It really is. It really is. When you have established a very adversarial, us against them, atmosphere in your home and in your family and your parenting, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some healing, and it's going to take some commitment. One of the things that I did was I broke it down into a year long of kind of baby steps, where every month you introduce one new thing. So they say it takes 21 days to make a habit. So taking a month to begin to incorporate some of these ideas and thoughts into your house helps you to kind of set yourself up for success as opposed to trying to jump in off the deep end. Again, the age of the children matter. If they're older children, it's good to sit down and say, you know what, I'm not happy with the way things are going. I'm not happy with myself and the choices that I've made as a parent. I'm not happy in the kind of the fruits that I'm seeing, coming out here. So I'm going to make some changes. And I want us to work together to make these changes. And I want us to hold each other accountable. So let's brainstorm together ways. Here's what I want to do. Let's brainstorm ways to begin to implement this and how we can hold each other accountable. We can have something like, a color that is going to be our new kind of touchstone to remind us all to use our kind voices and our gentle hands and things like that. So let's all go get a blue, I don't know, keychain or pair of socks or something like that. And just there's different ways that you can begin to incorporate the new mindset that it's not just about changing what you're doing, it's changing how you're thinking about each other. And that really is what you're going to need to do is go back and really look at your own mindset towards your children and their mindset towards you, and begin to open up and talk with each other and talk through old hurts, apologize for old hurts. And as you make mistakes, because you will, as you fall back into old patterns and things like that, apologize, open the conversation, heal in the moment, or as soon as possible afterwards, and regroup and pick yourself up and keep on going.
So I love the idea that you've broken this down into manageable steps. How would parents find that breakdown that you've done?
Well, the first book that I wrote, 2,000 Kisses a Day, ends with what's called 12 Steps to Gentle Parenting. And it breaks it down into once a month incorporating some of these different ideas into your household. And I decided that I would put that same chapter as an appendix in every subsequent book because people need to know not just what to do, but how to do it. And you know, a lot of times they're like, I know what I want to do, I just don't know how to go about starting. Where do I start? And so I decided just to include that as an appendix. And so you will actually find that at the end of every single book that I put out.
Wonderful. I love it. So parents, really, the price for the book, any book you've written just to get your hands on those 12 steps, is so worth it from my perspective, because most people are making the transition and they ask for a blueprint, and it's not easy to find. So you've actually broken it down to make it accessible to people doing the very hard work of trying to transform their relationships with their children. And what could be more important to me, you know, from my perspective, what could possibly be more important than that? It's wonderful.
Absolutely.
So you have 2,000 Kisses a Day, Gentle Parenting Through the Ages and Stages, which is your book that's already been out. It's a wonderful book. And now you have your new book, Whispers Through Time, Communication Through the Ages and Stages of Childhood. And how can parents get hold of those two books?
They are available on Amazon and through Barnes & Noble and other online retailers. They are in print. They're also available as ebooks. You can either get them for your Kindle, or you can get them for your iPhone, iPad, or you can read them on your computer. Locally here, they're beginning to make their way into bookstores. And I tussled a bit with my publisher over price, because I'm not in a business to make money. I'm here to really, I have a message. I have something to say. And so I insisted on the price being kept very low. And then we constantly have discounts also, you know, going out, and I have giveaways going on all the time and things like that, just because I really want people to know how to do what is in their heart and what they want to do, and sometimes they just don't know how to go about it. So I've kept the price very, very low, and the ebook price very, very low, and I try to share some sample chapters and different things, you know, on my website, so that people will kind of get a preview and know what they're getting before they get it.
Linda, tell us your website so people can easily find their way there.
Okay, it's www.littleheartsbooks.com.
Okay, and I can say I'm a longtime fan, and I read your posts on a regular basis, and it's a wonderful website. You can spend a lot of time on that website, really having your eyes open to seeing your children and yourself in a new way. So I highly recommend it. So we've been talking today to L.R.Knost of Little Heart Books, who is the author of Whispers Through Time and also of 2,000 Kisses a Day. This is Dr. Laura Markham of AHAParenting.com. And Linda, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to speak with you. I am so grateful to you for the work you're doing to change the options that parents have so that they can be the parent that they want to be.